Boris Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's now 7 months since Vladimir Putin launched his vile, illegal and unprovoked war against an innocent European country. And in those 7 months, his actions have cost almost as many Russian casualties as were sustained in the whole 10-year Russian invasion and occupation of Afghanistan. And if he continues at this rate, it won't be long, or that long, before Russian losses in Ukraine exceed American losses in the 20-year Vietnam conflict. And that is before we've counted the Ukrainian losses in the last 7 months, the catastrophic suffering that Putin has inflicted on that people, the torture, systematic rape, mass murder, deliberate targeting time after time of apartment blocks, schools, kindergartens and hospitals, and in all those 7 months of horror that this modern Moloch has personally unleashed, he has not attained a single one of his objectives in a war that, do not forget, was meant to be over in days. He has not overturned the Ukrainian government or captured the capital city. He hasn't even secured the Donbass, far from it. And instead of coming to terms with the reality of his mistake, I mean his complete misunderstanding of what Ukraine is and what really motivates Ukrainians, which is a simple love of their country, he's decided to double down on disaster, announced a mobilization of 300,000 more young Russians, a move that has caused such panic among people about to be fed into the meat grinder of Putin's war zone, that yesterday, in a single day, the price of a one-way air ticket from Moscow to South Africa went up to $50,000 because those potential conscripts can see that what began as a war to rebuild the Soviet empire has collapsed into a shameful war to save Putin's face. And they have no desire to be sacrificed on the altar of his ego. And at the same time, as members from both front benches have pointed out, he's threatening to hold sham referendums in those territories that he has occupied, and then to defend those territories with every weapon, as he says, in his arsenal, in words that he hopes will make our flesh creep and weaken our resolve. And he will fail in that pitiful bluster because he can see, and we can see, that he is escalating his rhetoric, not because he is strong, as has been said, but because he is weak. He is transparently a problem gambler who takes more risk, not because he is winning, but because he is now terrified of losing. I'll give way.
He did exactly the same, of course, in 2014. He held a fake referendum in Crimea, and unfortunately, the will of the West weakened. How do we make sure that people like Orban in Hungary and some of the people who are preaching disinformation in Italy do not win the day, and we maintain the united strength of the West in the face of this?
The Right Honourable Gentleman very much for his point, and I will come directly to what happened in 2014 in just a minute. But I think he should not underestimate the continued unity of the West, and I think that is one of the signal achievements of Vladimir Putin in the last 7 months, that he has seen a more coherent and unified Western alliance and a stronger NATO, perhaps than at any time in the last 20 years. And if I may just make some progress, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he wanted me to be within 10 minutes, I'll do my best. Thanks to the heroism of the Ukrainian armed forces, thanks in part to the weapons that we are proud to be offering. I congratulate my right honourable friend on his description of the work of the UK armed forces, the weapons that we are sending, and the huge list. Thanks also, of course, to the inspirational leadership of Vladimir Putin, the inspirational leadership of Volodymyr Zelensky. Forgive me. The Russian forces have, in recent days, been expelled from large parts of the northeast of the country around Kharkiv. And they are under increasing pressure in Kherson in the south. And I have no doubt that whatever that the Ukrainians will win. Because in the end, they have the inestimable moral and psychological advantage of fighting for their country, in their country, against an enemy that is increasingly demoralised and confused about what they're meant to be doing in that country and what they can hope to achieve. And at this turning point in the war, it is more vital than ever that we have the strategic patience to hold our nerve and ensure that Ukrainians succeed in recapturing their territory right to the borders of February the 24th and, if possible, to the pre-2014 boundaries, because that is what international law demands, and the right honourable gentleman is correct. It was our collective failure to insist on upholding international law 8 years ago that emboldened Putin to launch his disastrous invasion this year. If Putin is going to double down on his aggression, then we must double down in our defence of the Ukrainians, and we must be prepared to give more military assistance and more economic support. And I welcome warmly the announcements from this government this week. We must work with our friends and partners, as well as the Ukrainians, to ensure that we provide that country with the long-term assurance that they need on their security and defence that we have failed so far to provide in the 31 years since independence. Because if anyone has proved the absolute necessity of those guarantees, it is Vladimir Putin and his war. And we must close our ears in the months ahead to the absolute rubbish he talks. This is not some nuclear standoff between NATO and Russia, as he seemed to pretend yesterday. This is a war of aggression by Russia against an innocent neighbour, and we are helping with equipment and with training, as you might help a neighbour to fight a fire when their house has been attacked by an arsonist. And NATO is not engaged with a war against Russia. We're not engaged in a war against Russia, let alone against the Russian people.